What's next for a neighborhood under siege? We'll have to wait and see. Reporting live, Sadie Sinclair, Channel 7 News.
This is San Francisco.
If you have ever listened to this podcast, you are well aware of the repression that's going down on college campuses around the genocide in Palestine. And today, Sang Hee Kil at San Jose State, one of the two faculty members who was suspended for speaking out around Palestine, is going to talk about that experience. She recently wrote about the experience for a journal called Radical Teacher that we'll link to in the show notes. Obviously, the trustees and the presidents, etc., at universities want to disappear these moments of solidarity and protest, even if the university system exists in 20 years from now. We all know that it will re-narrate these moments as they are, which is heroic. And in the same way it did with South African apartheid, pretend that the repression that happened, they'll minimize that repression. So you can check out our episode with Matt and Matt of Left in the Bay for more on how that happened around South African apartheid and how history is repeating itself. But right now, here is Sang Hee Kil. Sang Hee Kil, thank you for coming on to San Francisco. We are going to talk about a piece that you wrote that's out in Radical Teacher. And I recommend everybody go and check out this piece. It is a piece that I was telling Sang Hee Kil. Is it Sang Hee? Just
Sang is fine. Yeah,
Sang. Okay, cool. The piece, it kind of like it's one of these products that's come out of the post October 7th, 2023 moment that allows us to see like the sort of depth of Zionism on campuses in the US, and also helps me as someone who has, viewed these things going on campuses. I have friends who have been put on leave because they express solidarity with Palestine from their faculty positions. And it kind of helps people like me, people like friends of mine, feel less gaslit by the system that is really trying to isolate people and tell them that no solidarity with Palestine should be shown. In any case, thank you for coming on the podcast. Stoked to talk about this piece. And to start out, would you mind kind of talking about where your activism has focused over the years prior to October 7th? Was this your first involvement with an encampment around Palestine solidarity?
Yeah, this was my first experience with encampments in general. And luckily, I'm really close with San Francisco State faculty. I helped with their formation of their Faculty for Justice for Palestine on their campus, which supported their student encampment. So I was there for the first week, volunteering for their encampment, hoping that my campus would also want to launch one as well. So it was really great collaborative experience for me to participate in San Francisco State's really successful encampment. And they're one of the two CSU campuses that were able to locally divest from the war machine on that campus. So props to them and their amazing activism, both the students, faculty, staff, and the community at San Francisco State University, because I learned lots from them in order to help my students with their goals in their encampment.
Yeah, what did that encampment look like?
So San Francisco State has a different history than San Jose State University in the sense that they really celebrate their activism and they celebrate a lot of their radical histories. So I think that the fact that they had a broad-based student coalition doing the encampment, as well as a diverse body of faculty supporting the students, really allowed them to be really tight with their messaging, really tight with their organizing, and able to be able to negotiate with their campus president around divestment. So it was a really just an amazing experience.
It's like the birthplace of critical ethnic studies, I believe.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. So
San Francisco State.
yeah, where San Jose State does not have any of those legacies. The Tommy Smith and Giancarlo's 1968 Mexico City Olympic moment is, I think, kind of peak for us in terms of activism in our kind of historical narratives, where San Francisco State's culture and history is far more robust.
And that was the moment when the two men who were doing track events in the Olympics in Mexico City did a Black Panther salute moment that is one of these like great moments where you see like the radical possibility like seep into like mainstream media, mainstream sports.
It's cited as one of the most iconic historic moments in sports history in terms of politics.
San Jose State they have erected these giant statues of the two men, and they're trying to flaunt their own sort of we believe in political expression on campus by putting these statues here. But obviously, we're here to talk about how your experience was very different from the experience that they were trying to sort of
resist and solve.
Yeah. Once the encampment at San Jose State went up, when did you find that the administration started to attack it?
It happened really fast. So I was, supporting and volunteering my time for a week at San Francisco State. And then I heard that an alumni group on my campus was going to start like a daytime sit-in. And so I went down on the first day of that daytime sit-in to support, whatever movement was going to happen on my campus. And that's when I decided to give an impromptu speech, just telling the students and the community members that showed up about my experiences the past week at San Francisco State, supporting their student encampment. And that inspired a student who I didn't know to approach me and say, do you really think that we can pull something like this off at San Jose State? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. It's not too late. And then we immediately, worked together over the weekend, and the encampment was launched the next week. So it was super fast what we went through in terms of the encampment experience. Almost immediately, San Jose State University administration and police were intimidating. The first night on the encampment, they sprayed us with water that's unsafe for human touch and soaked us and our tents and our stuff. And they made dubious claims, in my opinion, about, it's set on a timer and we couldn't turn off the timer. California's been in a drought for quite a while. They can turn off the water on a dime.
Right.
So I was pissed. Yeah. And I posted a bunch of stuff about, who said that, who turned on the sprinklers, who, whatever. And so that I think that was part of the reasoning about my temporary paid suspension, was that I used my personal social media to post job pages of admins who I thought did bad things to the students in the encampment. So, but even before that encampment, there was problems. So on President's Day last spring, my diversity, equity, and inclusion office on my campus co-sponsored this guy from Long Beach, CSU Long Beach, Budinger, and he had recently told his campus newspaper down in Long Beach that, he thought that was what was happening in Gaza wasn't a genocide. This is a problem, especially since our diversity, equity, inclusion office is co-sponsoring the speaker. So, I emailed them the night before of the talk and said, hey, I think you need to withdraw your co-sponsorship. And I also emailed the other departments that co-sponsored it. And I said, and these are the reasons why. Never heard back from anybody. I go to the talk to show up because I was alerted through other faculty in the CSU system, because I was then the co-chair of the Palestine Arab Muslim caucus of my union. And so our cell down in Long Beach said, hey, this guy's coming your way. And so I alerted people on my campus, but SJP, Students for Justice for Palestine, people at SJSU already knew about it. So I was like, okay, I'll see you there. But, they were already alerted to us going to his talk. So they moved his talk from the public library, the Martin Luther King Library, which is a true public library and public space. And they moved it to a classroom, someone's classroom, in order to privatize the event. And so I went to the library, they redirected us to someone's classroom, showed up to the classroom, and the students and community had an impromptu demonstration against this person outside of the classroom. There was another professor there, Jonathan Roth, and he is the top Zionist in our campus, and him and I had been butting heads for quite a number of years. Yeah, he did something rather super creepy, which was he stepped right in front of me at the action, and we're in a hallway. We're lined up on a hallway so that people can get through in the middle of the hallway, but we're lined up against the walls. And he put his back against me and leaned back on me, which was really creepy. But it was a good thing that he creeped because it made me aware of his presence. So then he pushed back on me again, and I stepped back to make him stop touching me, and then he kind of huffed down the hallway. So I think he did that because he wanted me to touch him so he could say that I assaulted him or something like that.
Right. Which is something we've seen over and over at so many protests, is Zionists coming very aggressively into whether it's an encampment or a one-off protest, attempting to have grounds to call the cops on protesters. There's some videos I can link to in the show notes of people really faking the grounds for claims of anti-Semitism, unfortunately, which has diluted, I think, what the word anti-Semitism. It's harder to know if when that word gets used, whether or not it's being used in a cynical way or not.
I think it's always used in a cynical way because you have to remember that most Palestinians are a Semitic people. But
Yeah.
the word has been co-opted to only used, So that's the layers of gaslighting around this issue is just intense. And the layers of gaslighting specifically around discourse and discursive framing is intense. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking happened. Is I think that he creeped on me. He put his back toward me. His back was basically touching my chest, which was creepy. And then I moved back, and he moved back, and I still wasn't going to touch him because I think he was ready for me to be like, "You assaulted me," right? And I watched him get upset, I think, about it and huff down the hallway, and that's when he assaulted this Palestinian student protester in front of me. She was trying to block his camera because he had, was fiddling for it, got it out, and she put her hand over the lens, and he did this kind of military move where he grabbed her wrist, twisted it, and then pulled it down to the ground. So I saw her kind of go down with her wrist towards the ground. Yeah. And then it was a little bit of a melee. So I think that's really where it started because my understanding is that he got job suspended and put on leave and put under investigation. And I think that was the day that I was also put under investigation. I wasn't put in on paid leave yet. I think they were waiting to build up some more stuff against me, but that was the date that was cited for me. I think that where it all began. So it almost feels to me like there was this viewpoint diversity that basically happened. So if the top Zionist needs to be put on paid leave and investigation, then the top pro-Palestinian activist on campus needs to also.
Right. Yeah, no, totally hear that. I mean, it's just ridiculous that the DEI office also would be sponsoring this event. It is ludicrous. But again, another thing that we've seen that is super gaslighty. A lot of even DEI offices saying we love free speech, except when it comes to Palestine. We love diversity more generally, except if you're Palestinian.
His office have these lofty mission statements where they're going to foster diversity, protect diversity, things of that nature. But really, DEI offices on campus are diversity management.
Yeah, no, there's this huge right-wing reaction against DEI And unfortunately, it makes it a lot harder for people like me to want to go out and defend offices when they pull things like this. And like you said, yeah, that diversity management and like sort of being the mediator between the administration, which has, you know, shown that it's going to defend Zionism at whatever cost, playing defense for the Zionist forces.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Thanks for, yeah, kind of giving us some background on what went down. And how did the encampment end?
So it went on for about 10 days. So after the initial soaking, you know, we recovered, we dried off, we did not decamp. It looked like at first, you know, we were really concerned about campus police because we had seen things that happened, you know, at Columbia and UCLA, Santa Cruz. So we were concerned about that. And, you know, I was the only faculty to encamp with the students. And that's the reason why I encamped with the students, is because I was so concerned about police repression and police violence. So at first, the first couple of days, we were heavily being monitored. You know, the encampment was across the administration building, and they took out a whole room down in the first floor that was like kind of a fishbowl window situation to overlook us.
Mm.
And they took over that space for the first several days. But after I think they realized that we were peaceful, right? They decamped from that particular observation point. I did see that they had those like fancy anti-riot kind of noise making machines that were around the corners. I did let the students know that I think that they were going to try to use this to keep us awake in the middle of the night, but they ended up not doing that. I think also too, our campus PD is led by an individual who sees themselves as a kind of like a community police officer, kind of a barbershop police officer. So it might not have worked within that kind of policing optic.
Sure. Probably not. Yeah.
So it was really about the rest of the days being about how to get the message out to the broader Bay Area about the encampment and what their demands were, and then how to get the administration to give like full disclosure about their divestments and then promises to divest.
I have to say that, you know, like, even though all these encampments went down, like, we'll always believe that at the UCs, you know, there was backlash with them creating these new policies to create more of a punishment for when encampments go up.
Time, place, manner.
Yeah, directly as a response to these Palestine solidarity encampments. Most likely, like, did you interact with students who, for them, it was kind of like their first experience organizing on that level?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. So remember, like, difference between San Jose's campus and San Francisco's campus is that San Francisco has a long history of activism and San Jose does not. So most of these students that I was working with did not have the same level of either grassroots activism, street activism, you know, all types of social justice activism, working with a lot of people this was like their first act of resistance and protest. Yeah. So there was a lot of, you know, excitement and hope, you know, especially being a part of this like popular student movement for Gaza. But there was also lots of fear that I sensed, you know, because you just don't know which way it's going to go. We don't know these administrators very well. We had a new president that just came in. We didn't know how well the Zionists were organized. Are they as organized as well as they were in LA? And in New York, things of that nature. So there was just a lot of nervousness. And then also too, what was unique about the student encampment that happened on my campus was it was a Muslim student encampment. So unlike the other 6 that happened in the CSU systems, the one that happened at San Jose State was mostly Muslim students.
And I mean, for people who did not see, I presume most of the people who will be listening to this did see some of the videos coming out from UCLA. Terrifying. Briefly was at Columbia, the campus of Columbia last spring, by which time they had installed like checkpoints at every public gate that had previously just been open. And I think it's still on that level of lockdown. It's wild. If people haven't seen some of these images,
and it's unfortunate because it looks like to me that the CSU and the UC have been coordinating over the summer and improving their time, place, manner policies to be even more repressive than they were before. And now that Trump has been voted into office for the second time, we're looking at this really interesting convergence of university systems and this kind of rise of fascism in our government paralleling each other.
Yeah, I was wondering if this experience kind of changed your view of the California public higher education system, or more generally, how universities function in the US now. Because for so long, there's been this representation of universities in the media as being these places that are just these left-wing bastions. How true or false is that representation to you?
Okay. So it's a more complicated picture, right? Because on the one hand, you know, this movement was beautiful and it came out of university campuses, and there is power to the student movements, and they have an historical record of being able to do this, right? With South African apartheid.
Right.
So, as well as other civil rights movements, right? So, but on the other hand, we have the neoliberal transformation of our higher education system, as well as our K through 12, right? We have the erosion of the faculty right of co-governance on campuses. And then we have the rise of, the corporate modeling, basically. Well, let's get rid of mostly tenure track faculty, replace them with part-time lecturer faculty to wrestle control, basically, and diminish faculty co-governance. And then let's spend all this money on our salaries and bloated admin positions and building vanity projects, and then blame any kind of budgetary shortfall on faculty not recruiting students for enrollment. Go ahead and create a more repressive campus where you control faculty, staff, students, and community. And it just really is a battleground that faculty need to slay better, right? So we need stronger unions. Faculty need unions. So if they don't have one, they need to start ones. And I just saw an article with USC saying that the faculty want to start a union. UCs obviously, need faculty unions, considering what they just went through with supporting their students and the encampments that happen in the UC systems. So yeah, it's a really complex picture. And the convergence of this like neo-fascist government with the Trump Part 2 and the love of corporations, right, is paralleling higher ed and their trajectory of managing higher education in a corporate model. And we're seeing constitutional rights die.
Yeah. And I guess part of the reason that the media representation exists, it serves a purpose sort of to universities have become a target of the right. They've been a target of the right for so long. Clearly, there is some kind of power in the student body, in the faculty, that the right doesn't want to see unleashed.
Unleashed now, but there might be some interesting. I just was at this, the book launch for this book called Lend and Rule by the Debt Collective, and they're interested in analyzing, debt in higher ed and the way it's used against students and faculty to kind of financialize higher ed, right?
Yeah, we've had them on the podcast, so I'll link to that episode.
Fantastic. Yeah. They mentioned in the talk that I was at that they had an example, I think it was in Florida, where the right were actually interested in fighting time, place, manner, because they also see the universities as hotbeds, basically. Yeah. And they're interested in using universities the same way that, students came out for Palestine. And so they see these time, place, manners as preventing them.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
So scary.
Something to watch out for.
Yeah, something to watch out for. Because, Florida is one of our political freak states. So it doesn't necessarily speak for the rest of the states, but still there's a lot of, it becomes this kind of like laboratory basically for the right. And so we do have to watch things that come out of Florida to see if it does affect us on the other side of the coast. So no, it was a really good point that one of the members of the Debt Collective pointed out.
Yeah, in your piece, which again suggests to everyone read, especially if you haven't been paying attention to how the pro-Palestine movement has been forming on campuses. I think most of the people listening to this podcast will be familiar. But in the piece, you speak to the structural reasons why, for example, you were the only faculty member that was camping out with students on campus. And, why would faculty sort of not publicly support students, maybe not camp out with them, but also just more generally, why might they not want to send public expressions of support? As you mentioned in the article, like it is a structural thing that makes people sort of want to stay quiet.
I think there's a lot of stuff, right? Unfortunately, Jonathan Roth and I, he was the top Zionist, I was the top pro-Palestinian activist on our campus, and we went toe-to-toe quite a bit in front of faculty around this issue. So I think faculty are scared, right? Because I was accused of being a terrorist, accused of being a terrorist supporter, accused of, all sorts of things that Palestinians are accused of and their allies, right? And I think that faculty don't want to be on the receiving end of that. So they see what happens to me and then they get scared about speaking out, right? And I think that's what my campus mimicked a bit, right? So let's kick the shit out of saying around her pro-Palestinian to send a message to the rest of the faculty, like don't do what Sang does, because what will happen.
Yeah, making an example. Yeah.
Yeah. But honestly, really, I think that because of the proximity of my campus to Silicon Valley, it just happens to lend itself to being like Zionist. And so I think faculty find it hard to really resist coming out for Palestine, even during an active genocide and a massive populationing of a people and their children, because there really is no institutional mechanisms that are grounded enough and brave enough to resist the matrix of administrative domination concept that I talk about, which is that, the administrators really have so much control on my campus because of the failure of faculty co-governance. Our power as faculty has really diminished to almost a symbolic level instead of an actual one. And so when administrators flex intimidation, the ripple effect and how it impacts faculty is pretty immediate. So yeah, I mean, I described 3 layers that I think were really crucial. One, like many campuses, the administrators refused to use the word genocide to describe what was happening. Conflict, but not genocide. And then 2, the academic senate also refused to talk about the genocide in Gaza. And then 3, my own union, CFA SJSU, actively barred me and my co-chair of the Palestine Arab Muslim caucus of our union from even entering the room to present a draft resolution for, ending the genocide, protect academic freedom, and aid to Israel. So when you have that triple layer of silencing, you create a culture of dispossession for faculty. And that's what I kind of describe, or that's the only analysis I could really come up with. Well, why the hell was I the only faculty that encamped with the students out of 2,000 faculty at San Jose State University? So for me, that article is trying to make sense of the experience that I just went through and why I was so alone.
And thank you for, stringing these words together so beautifully in a way that, like we're still, it's been over a year since the start of this latest wave of genocide. And we're still like trying to figure out what we're doing, how this movement continues to go forward, because we know it has to. And I think pieces like this are helping us to grapple with the ideas around that. So yeah, thank you. Was there anything else in the piece that you wanted to highlight that you, as you were trying to sort of grapple with these things, um, any realizations you came to that you might want to share?
I mean, I touch upon it towards the end of the piece, but I do think that, faculty unions need to be stronger. I think there's too much weaknesses in our faculty unions in the sense that they kind of mimic and take their PowerPoints from the Democratic Party, and it didn't work out for us in this last election. And I think faculty unions really need to get their power from organizing their campuses and organizing their faculty and not trying to rely on the democratic system and their democratic representatives for union power. And so, right now, the union is helping me with my investigation. They provided me a Weingarten witness with the 2 statutory grievances that I filed related to my job suspension. They basically told me you're on your own. And it's another example of this thing called Palestinian exceptionalism in my book, which is happening all across the nation and around the world, which is, fair is fair until it relates to Palestine. And then there's the suspension of fairness.
Point of gaslighting for all what is going on. And it's been a thing that I remember it was years ago when I first heard this term PEP, like progressive accept on Palestine, in the quote unquote liberal bastions of universities, being able to talk about any issue, any political struggle, except for the one going on in apartheid Palestine.
Because you will be harassed.
Yeah.
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 And so that's why there's this resounding silences, like even before I was suspended, like students were telling me that people were rarely talking about the genocide in classrooms. That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's shameful. That is just heartbreaking.
Right.
So
yeah.
But again, that's the Palestinian exceptionalism, happening on the ground, unfolding while a genocide is happening, knowing that this violates every democratic principle that we're supposed to be able to embrace, that we've been taught from K through 12 and in higher ed if you went there. And but here we are. Yeah. Year plus of a genocide. How many images have you seen of children just being decimated, families being decimated, no place to go, no place to run, starvation. And the will to care and love the Palestinian people in the world is not enough. And we have to keep on striving. We have to keep on organizing. We have to keep on supporting the Palestinian people in the best way we can in the positions that we hold in order for us to be able to stop this genocide and any the future genocides.
Yeah. And it does. Yeah. I mean, it takes risks. And so, thank you for taking risks. It is another thing that gaslights me every time, hearing about the universities in Gaza that have been targeted, just kind of, the decimation of education systems there. And in the same, I come from the journalism world and the targeting of journalists and censorship and the targeting of media organizations that are just trying to get out information about what's happening in Gaza. It makes you want to do bad things. I mean, it makes you
want to pull your hair out, scream and shout. Yeah, I mean, it really is. So, I mean, I was privileged enough to be able to go to, the West Bank, not Gaza, West Bank in 2016, in the summer 2016. And I was already, I was already one of the earlier signers of the academic boycott. I got on Canary Mission very early for signing that. But, it was one of those things where I was lefty. I knew that there was a settler colonial situation. I knew that the Palestinians, had already experienced a genocide and displaced from their land and living in apartheid. But to actually see it was something totally different. And the level of information about the way the apartheid system worked there that we didn't know as typical US American media consumers really shocked me. So that's where I kind of realized that there was this really like watertight information embargo that was happening that prevented the Palestinian people from effectively getting their messaging out about what they were experiencing under Israeli occupation and rule. And now we're seeing the effects of that poor information now spill over into, you know, how the genocide got covered, how the attacks of October 7th got covered, et cetera, et cetera. And it's been a really, really long learning process for the, you know, mainstream media to understand colonization, occupation, apartheid, and genocide.
Yeah.
And too slow, not fast enough.
No. And I think as a result, yeah, you have so many people who have lost faith in traditional media. And for all of the administrators and faculty members who are trying to repress the genocide and not let it be spoken on campuses, what kind of just the sort of loss of faith in academic systems too, when, you know, this is the place you're supposed to learn. And if there are certain issues that are just held in like this sort of no-go zone, it makes you lose faith in the institution itself.
Yeah, I mean, I try to write with sympathy in my piece towards faculty. I know that they're dispossessed, and it's not like they checked the box, please dispossess me, when they took the job, right? This is something that unfolded without much communication, without much direction, but it just exists, right? So I understand that, you know, 60% of our faculty on our campus are lecturers, and they're not tenure track, and tenure track have a lot more privilege and job security, and that, you know, we have mostly white faculty versus, you know, people of color faculty, and, you know, the divisions kind of keep going on, right? And so I try to be, you know, sympathetic with why faculty feel dispossessed, are dispossessed. But personally, in my heart, I do get very pissed, I think is the right word, at some bourgeois nature of faculty sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
They don't see themselves as educational workers. They don't see themselves being exploited as educational workers. And they find it hard to organize with other faculty and resist this matrix of administrative domination that I described happening in the article for Radical Teacher that I just published. You know, I really want faculty to, you know, decolonize their petit bourgeois nature in this moment of genocide, because we need more faculty to speak out. We need more faculty to speak out in concerted activities with other faculty, right? They need to be organized about it, because, you know, the stunning difference between, you know, what happened at San Francisco State's encampment and what happened at San Jose State University's encampment was that, you know, I got job suspended, and San Francisco State didn't have any faculty that were job suspended. But San Francisco State had, you know, dozens of faculty who worked together to support their students, right? But when you have one lone wolf like me, it's so easy to target, right?
Sure.
So, you know, really just to encourage faculty to really like see the fact that, you know, our power of faculty co-governance is almost to the level of non-existence. We need to fight for it back. It's the only way they're going to push back against the neoliberal transformation of the university. And that we need to decolonize the petit bourgeoisness that we find ourselves in, that makes us not speak out against a genocide and against a colonial regime, and to really, you know, dig deep and organize with each other to be able to find our power in order to take it back from these administrators.
Thank you. Yeah, beautifully put. Yeah, bottom line, we got to stop. We have to stop sending these American bombs over to decimate these colleges in Gaza. Thank you so much, Sang. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind telling people if they want to follow your work, how they can do that online.
Yeah, I do have an Insta account that I opened up just for this, the anti-genocide work. And so it's under my full name, Sangheakil on Instagram. And I post updates there, and they can follow me there for sure.
Cool. We'll link to that in the piece. Thank you again so much.
Yeah, and thanks for covering this and all the work that you do. Really appreciate it.
All right, we'll talk soon.
All right, sounds good.
Next up is G, an autonomous organizer in San Francisco who is going to speak on the Zionist rabbi who runs the, quote, social justice office at Glide Church, which is a nonprofit in the Tenderloin. And while they were working at Glide, G saw how this institution that has been publicly all about marginalized people, how they make an exception when it comes to Palestinians. And I think this interview pairs well with the classic episode with Dean Spade on how nonprofits can really drain the energy out of liberatory movements. Gee, thank you for joining us in San Francisco. After I know you have listened to many of the episodes in the past, so I just want to congratulate you on some recent direct actions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any favorite targets that you've been able to disrupt recently?
Yeah, I just like going after, just going for it. I went to Manny's a few months ago and did some direct action there just by blasting the sounds of children dying in Gaza, and I interrupted their phone banking. They were trying to phone bank for Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And I was able to disrupt that. I did not get to make it in the back where London Breed was, who was still our mayor at the time, but I did enough to where I disrupted their phone banking. So that was pretty effective.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, just like bringing that kind of energy into these spaces where, I mean, Manny's is kind of this like Death Star of political power in the city right now. It seems like all of the Democratic politicians want to kiss Manny's ring whenever they can. And
yeah.
Manny, as we have covered in the past, is very much a Zionist.
Yes, indeed. And I did find out he was at the one I went to yesterday. He was in the audience when I interrupted Raphael Mendelman's at the Unitarian Church. I disrupted that with D.A. Jenkins, and Chief Scott was up on stage.
So, right on. Yeah, getting some love from Manny and stuff in the crowd. I mean, it's just a good reminder of how it can be really, I don't know, it makes you feel good to make these people who are trying to make people outside of the US or in the US as well, like very uncomfortable, make our lives so uncomfortable and unbearable. So the least we can do is bring some of that energy back to them.
Yeah. Well, that's just it, is like, to remind them, like, to basically humble them. You're not better than us. You're a human being just like we are.
Yeah.
So.
Agree.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I've never asked you this before, even though we've hung out a few times, like, what would you consider your political awakening, or are there any moments in your life that moved you to act on your politics?
Sure. I was very, very young and in child of the 80s. And unfortunately, my parents were Ronald Reagan. I came from a very conservative family, and I was large family. And I was always just odd. I was like coming out, and then Ronald Reagan, and then I stood out. I questioned. I did not fit in with my family. I couldn't relate to their ideologies or who they looked up to, and who they agreed with was definitely not in line with who I was. So if anything, my parents passed away, but we came to terms and agreements to disagree. And they just, I was just always this radical leftist in the family, the only one. Everyone else just kind of went along with the family tradition or this upbringing, and I just always was anti-authoritarian. And so if anything, they kind of like spurred me, and they kind of catalyzed me to be more individualistic and more leftist and more questioning and critical thinking. And so that's really what inspired me to go deeper, to go more left.
Right on. Right on.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that you've done that, of course, is, made some noise in the environments where it seems like the established order, the status quo, is really trying to cling to power when it's very clear that for the majority of people, the status quo is not working.
No.
And so you came to work at Glide, and just wondering, so first of all, could you tell people that are listening from outside San Francisco, what is Glide and how you came to work there?
So Glide started out as a church organization in like almost 100 years ago, actually, like through the 20s. And there's the organization part, which does more of social justice and community outreach of helping the communities in need. And with Reverend Cecil Glide and Janice, they were basically the activists, the ones that catalyzed a lot to happen in the 60s and 70s and the 80s. And then I living in the community, in the area, I thought, I want to get more into helping out and volunteering. And I could see what was happening with the stigmas of people that are unhoused, the whole like language of, the war on drugs, BS and everything. Yeah. And so I decided, I'm going to reach out and I want to volunteer and get more involved and learn and be a part of the community and make a difference. And interesting enough is I actually was applying for the social justice department. They didn't need any volunteering at the time, but the harm reduction department did. So I started actually volunteering with the harm reduction, doing outreach stuff and helping with supplies. And then beginning of the year, there was a position part-time available that was offered. They said, would you like to apply for it? And so I did. It was only for 6 months, which was enough time for me to learn, to grow, and to be a part of the community, but also to know more about this organization. I don't know if I got hired at the right time or the wrong time or all of the above, because apparently there was a lot that had been disheveled and going. It was a mess that happened the year before. I guess the CEO had quit or left. And then the new CEO, Dr. Gina Farmer, came on board last year. And nobody was saying anything yay or nay about her. And I didn't really know anything about her. And then they just got unionized at the beginning of the year, right at the time when I got hired as a part-time position. But I noticed there was such a high turnover. And that's when I started just observing and seeing more. And I was like, okay, this is good for me to take notes, because I'm not committed. Like, I'm not going to be hired on being part of the union. I'm part-time temp. 20 hours. This is enough time to get my feet to see what's exactly going on. And then I started hearing I'm not naming names, but staff members were telling me stuff. And there was such a high turnover. I was seeing people calling in sick. People were quitting. It was like one staff member said, this isn't Target. They're turning this into Target. These are human beings. We're dealing with human beings. Mm. And I noticed there was nobody for them to go talk to. Like, people were having like mental health crises. I mean, you're dealing with you're going out and doing outreach stuff, and you're dealing with a lot. You're going to get vicarious trauma. And I even asked, I said, is there any counselor or anybody to talk to? And they had just cut that out of their department. There is nobody as far as a counselor, a therapist to go talk to. The queer people were quitting. Trans people. I think there was 2 new hires that were Black that were getting hired when I was leaving my temp position. So I didn't really see this inclusiveness. And this is something that I feel in a workplace, to me, that's red flags.
Yeah.
When you start seeing LGBTQ and BIPOC people quitting or leaving, that's to me some red flags. And that's when I started hearing more about what was going on I was told about the rabbi there that runs the social justice department with the whole October 7th that happened, where he basically came out and was just emailing about how this was so horrible, what happened with Hamas, and basically included the Reverend's name without even asking permission.
Right. So Cecil Williams, who has like this sort of, it is like a reverend, and there was a lot of reverence for him as a figure in the community. Of course, you'll get like different feedback from different people, but he was a sort of historic figure in the Tenderloin. I mean, Glide has been around for close to 100 years, I believe.
Yeah.
And
and he retired. He retired. He wasn't the Reverend at the time. Is this Reverend Martin here, who is now, and he came out and apologized later. He goes, I do not agree with this email.
Yeah. So let's talk about the email. So you get to Glide, you're working there. It's post October 7th, 2023. You're seeing a lot of people leaving, and then you hear whispers of this email that was sent out within 24 hours of October 7th.
Right. And the staff was calling him on it and wanting clarification. He has not responded to any of them at all. That to me is concerning. It's like, and this is the thing too, is he's the main person directing the social justice department.
Right. So this rabbi who is in charge of the social justice department,
and he's Zionist.
Unquote,
he's
who
Zionist.
Is an avowed Zionist. And okay, so maybe talk about like what were the particulars of the email that he sent out?
Basically like, oh, it's so awful with Hamas, what's happened, and just very, very biased, obviously, with the whole October 7th thing. So that's when people were wanting to question him on it. Like, what do you mean by this? Like, what about Palestine? This is the thing, is they have not once said anything about Palestine, nothing about this whole year, even to this day.
Yeah. And this is with the Reverend's name on it that didn't consent to that, in addition to coming from what is quote unquote the social justice department. So it is a little bit, I mean, it's fishy if there is this immediate condemnation of Hamas. We know that was a logic trick that was being played on all of us in the US back around October 7th, that we were supposed to see the Israeli victims as victims, and then we were supposed to see all of the Palestinians as animals, basically. That's like the term that some of the Israeli government officials were using.
And this is the thing too, is he had plenty of time after October 7th, a month or 2 months, to come back around and maybe do another email or say something a little bit more accurate and up to date, or even responding to some of the staff members of asking him questions like, are you Zionist? What is your stand on Palestine? And he would not respond to any of their emails. And then if he ever saw them around, it was like he just would glare at them and not say anything and walk by. And it's like, to me, that's not good. That's not creating a safe environment at all. And also, too, I just want to say, too, I noticed there was surveillance cameras everywhere. There were surveillance cameras in the elevators. There were surveillance cameras in all of the floors. There was some of the staff members, oh, we got to be quiet, got to watch what we're saying. What are you talking about? And it was like, it was cameras everywhere. And it's like, people like, it's like, you could be queer, or you could be leftist, but you've got to be quiet about it. And you've got to be refined, and you've got to act a certain way. I was like, this is not a safe environment at all. This is not encouraging radical thinking or progressive thinking or nothing. In fact, it's going to do the opposite, which is exactly what I saw with people calling out sick all the time and people quitting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's unfortunate because much sort of like nonprofit infrastructure there is around kind of necessities for low income people or people who are, caught up with heavy drug use. There's like a reproduction of sort of like prison atmospheres at some of these nonprofits. And it sounds like that's the case
And
at Glide with surveillance.
Yeah, exactly. And these are people that had served time and they're going to be working in the workforce. And it's like the last thing they want is to be reminded and triggered of the very environment that they were in.
Yeah. And then also having all of these sort of unofficial rules about like how loud you're allowed to be as somebody who is queer. Keep in mind that Glide has been known for being like an inclusive space for, on the side of inclusive and progress for decades. That can flip if you have people like coming in and out like it's a revolving door, and you have higher ups who are heading up the social justice department who are sort of gaslighting people around whether or not Palestinians deserve to live.
And that's the thing, is they have yet, like I said, this whole year, nobody has made anything on their emails, any kind of announcements about anything going on in Palestine. And what's concerning too is Rabbi Michael Isaac, he had students in November, this past November, come from Israel University, Ben Gurion University, where one of the students was an IOF soldier who volunteered with the services and he was killed. And it was Nira Cohen. And so he hosted all these Israeli students to come and honor their fellow student who had died. They were not met with kind words from the community at all, because it's like, how dare you glorify this IOF soldier?
For sure, yeah.
And you're not talking about anything about the Palestinians or the Arab community. Irony of this too is Glide, where they're located in the Tenderloin, that area is predominantly Muslim and Arab. And it's like, it's really weird to see. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's not surprising. It's just yet to see where in their congregation or anything, and I've gone to their church service, and at the end they say amen, and they say it in every language. They say it in Christian, they say it in Buddhist, they say it in Muslim. But it's like, I have not seen or heard them have any kind of religious leader from Muslim community or Buddhist or anybody come and talk. And it's like, where's the inclusiveness that you all say that you are? I'm not seeing it.
Right.
Seeing it at all.
Right. Yeah, totally. I mean, it's really gross to hear about people celebrating somebody who was part of the IOF. I think that one of my favorite actually actions that happened early on and at the end of 2023 in solidarity with Palestinians was the flooding of an event on the peninsula for the Friends of the IDF, or like this Wonder Woman Gal Gadot supported organization that basically just raises more money for one of the most well-equipped militaries in the world, the Israeli military.
Oh, yeah.
And so they actually flooded out that event.
Nice.
But it's laughable that they would like invite people there under like the auspices of this being a sort of social justice event that we need to celebrate the basically perpetrator of all of these like war crimes that we know the IOF is involved in, or at the very least, upholding of apartheid.
If I did some research, I don't see that they had a rabbi there working until this one, Rabbi Michael Lazak, who looks like started around 2017 at Glide. And so I don't see where they've had any of the rabbi before him. And he's from San Rafael, and he was part of a more conservative congregation in San Rafael. And his wife is also a rabbi that leads the kitchen, which tends to be attracts right-wing conservative people too. So yeah, it's a little, it makes you go, scratch your head, because it's like, why are they so heavily influenced here at this organization? In fact, I wanted to speak with Dr. Gina Frommer, and she came to one of our staff meetings. That was around September when I saw that Civic Joy Fund had signed up to clean up the streets on the weekend, cleaning the neighborhood, cleaning the TL. And so I brought it up to her attention. I said, Dr. Gina, I don't know if you're aware of this, but this weekend you're doing a clean up the streets event with Civic Joy Fund. And she said, I just heard about this. I said, are you aware of who they are? Manny Upatile. And so I kind of briefed her on it. She goes, I just found out about this. She goes, thank you. I'll look into this. And so I let her follow up on it on her own. And then I scheduled a 10-minute follow-up meeting with her the following week. And she automatically said to me, she asked me, she goes, what does Zionism mean to you? I said, well, Zionism to me means Jewish exceptionalism. Fundamentalism, it's racism, it's hierarchy, it leaves a lot of people out of the marginalized communities. And she quickly said, do you need to tell me that Daniel Lurie is racist? When I was the CEO of the YMCA, he poured a lot of money into the Black community. I said, well, let me just put it to you this way. And I spoke her language. I said, the devil wears disguises, because I knew she was Christian. And I just wanted her to think about it. I said, I'm not going to tell you how to run your organization. I'm just giving you some information about these people, and please be careful.
Yeah.
And that's it. And she looked at me like she didn't know what to say. Like, I left her with some foods of thought, but it's like, I just knew automatically, like, oh, you're in with London Breed. She's good friends with London Breed, and she's good wins. And she kept voluntarily saying, well, we're not taking any money from Civic Joy Fund. We're not taking any money from Civic Joy Fund. And she said it a few times. And to me, when I hear somebody say that, it's almost like they're admitting guilt or something. Because it's like, I'm thinking, if Daniel Lurie and Manny Yucatel were to go to her and to Glide and go, here's some money, I don't think they would turn it down. I really don't.
Right. And so, I mean, the wild part is that they're just associating their name, which, whatever. Like, I think a lot of people outside of Glide would consider it to be like, this is like a net positive, like this is like a good organization, and they're just associating their name with Civic Joy Fund, which was established by a few billionaire dynasties in the city a few years ago, as sort of like a Zionist families who are funding these things. So Glide is basically using their good name, associating it with Civic Joy Fund for no money at all. For like, what does Glide get out of it?
That's what I mean. It's like, what are you getting out of this? And it's like, so I decided to snoop, and I walked by, and it was disguised. I didn't want anyone to see me. I was across the street, and they had their ridiculous taco truck crap there that Civic Joy Fund was doing, feeding the people and all this. So it's like, I just, like I said, I wasn't going to ask her for the budget report and see, but I just did not, I didn't totally believe her in a way. I was like, I don't believe that they're going to turn away money. I doubt it. I mean, to your point, they're going to get something out of this.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bummer. Like, as somebody who is atheist, I like more and more like having to deal with the religion focused aspects of all of these sort of like controversies of our time. Like, it's kind of just pushing me further and further away from like traditional organized religions, which,
Yeah.
you know, I like grew up with some Catholic family, and
Yeah.
you know, that always seemed like a very sort of dark religion. And so I like, you know, started from an early age like having a reaction against these huge religious institutions like the Catholic Church. And yeah, I mean, this like sort of the Palestine, like the most recent wave of genocide is really, you know, pushing me against these traditional organized religions even more.
Yeah, it's sickening and sad to see too, because you know, like so I grew up in a Christian, Protestant, and Catholic family. I left the church at 14, and then I've explored and I've studied different various religions and faith. But it's like these people are going the total opposite of what the fundamental mission of who they are, what they started with. And is when Reverend Cecil Williams died, which I believe was in May. I have to look back and see if last year. It's almost like all of a sudden they did this weird, crazy ass spending on shit, like all this furniture and stuff outside, all this awnings and all this aesthetic stuff. And I'm just like, it, to my coworker said, it like feels like Target. And I was like, this is starting to look like Target. Like it does not look like what, like this the community of helping the community foundation. It's just really, it's sad. It's really, really sad to see.
Yeah. I mean, I know that has been happening in San Francisco for some time, like with some of the smaller healthcare nonprofits being sort of consumed into the umbrella of Health Rights 360, which is one of the bigger healthcare providers if you're low income. And they do have, you know, harm reduction services, and they have like therapy if you're broke and you can't afford it. But at the same time, by like sort of trying to centralize a lot of these things and taking the basically absorbing these smaller community-based groups, like they are all becoming sort of like McDonald's Target-fied. Like it's like very, you know, they're trying to become like the bureaucracies that fund them in City Hall.
And I didn't know that Health Right 360 used to be a Glide until I was working there, and I saw. I did not know that. I mean, now they've got their own place, but originally they were inside the Glide organization. They were part of it. So
it's I mean, it's you hate to see it because it's like, I mean, and I guess, you know, it's a lot of these institutions, like they have a sort of lifetime or like a shelf life, I suppose, like where like they are of use to the community, and then sometimes like for reasons like somebody getting a DEI position that's called social justice, you know, like the social justice office, and they decide to co-opt the things that community valued about the place and use them for the ends of conservative religious ends. Then it's maybe like time to sunset the organization.
And what's really sad too is like I knew my position was temp. It was only going to be 6 months, which is fine. I was not wanting to stay working there to a full time and get enmeshed, engulfed in the drama and the bureaucracy and the bullshit of the organization. But I wanted to stay and volunteer to help out. And what's interesting is as soon as I had the meeting with Dr. Gina and my time is up, it's almost like I'm pretty sure with the cameras and surveillance, I heard some of the things I've said. They did not want me. They didn't. They're like, oh, yeah, we'll call you back. We'll get you a volunteer. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure they made sure that they did not want G to come back and volunteer, be there at all, because I was too much. I was asking the right questions.
Yeah.
And I was sparking ideas and staff members. And I'm like saying things like, you guys are union. You know that, right? You guys are now a union. You do have power. You guys should say something. You guys should get together. And I was like giving them ideas. And so they couldn't wait to get rid of me.
Yeah. But I appreciate that energy. I know that people listening to this like know that we need more of that energy in 2025. It's important.
Yes.
So if people do want to follow some of your work online, is there a place that they can do that? Or
Yeah. So I kind of on my own, and I do work with the communities and do work with organizations here. I'm not in a group organization, but I do network with the communities. I'm at Gay 13. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm just kind of getting started with some stuff. So I don't really have like Substacks or anything like that lined up yet. But I'm what you want to call a catalyst. I'm just out here just kind of like getting things moving and just rocking things out.
doing the autonomous actions that need to happen. I mean, I think it's an anarchist way of being in the world. And I'm here for it. I'm like we all need to be doing our own autonomous actions throughout the day, like incorporating them into our everyday.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think, there's a balance, because I really feel the last 100 years of our education, our social system has taught us to be more individualistic and independent, which is good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's kind of defeated too, because we need to build communities. We need to work with each other. Yes. So there needs to be that balance too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's like as I'm getting older, I'm like trying to, with my therapist, like talk through like moving away from the black and whites and into the gray space is like a theme that keeps coming up in those sessions.
Right.
But thank you for doing what you do. I'm always stoked to see you out in the world, the actual community, and stoked to like sort of give people an idea of what's happening. This is like kind of a scene that's happening in a lot of nonprofits across the US that are sort of in some cases like they have Zionists on their boards, or they're getting funding from Zionist organizations.
This is what I'm finding to be more and more true, Toshio, is I'm like researching and I'm seeing who is not a Zionist on a board now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like what we've known for a while that like charity, like philanthropy, like people are not doing this like usually because they're just wholly just wanting to give back. There's always some push and pull. There's always something that they're getting out of it. And in many cases, maybe that's just having someone who is going to be on the side of Israel if shit hits the fan.
Well, that's the thing with the rabbi I was speaking of here, is that he is on the Bay Area Organizing Committee. And that's one of the biggest committees. And I was digging deep on that. And they do a lot of funding for Israel.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, one black and white thing that I will subscribe to is that, genocide is bad. And that as somebody who, cares about other human beings in the world, I think that there should be like baseline ethics considerations when we're out in the world. And one should be, genocide is bad. And if you're supporting Israel right now, if you're supporting the US supporting Israel, because again, we continue to send them weapons and send them money. I think that if that's your point of view, that is a line that I can't cross. I can't really like hang out with you.
No,
if that's
no.
what you subscribe to.
Absolutely not. That's a line for me as well. So, wow. Thank
Cool.
you. Thank you so
All right,
much.
dope.
for being
Yeah,
with me.
stoked. And like, hopefully, I know it's your birthday tomorrow, so
Yes, thank
whatever
you.
ends up going down, happy birthday. And
Thank you.
see you out in the streets.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, bye. Thank you for listening to Sad Francisco. I am Toshio Meronek, and my co-producer is Tofu Estolas. Patreon.com/Sad Francisco is where you can find our past episodes and transcripts, and it's also where you can help us out with a donation. And if you do, it comes with some benefits like getting the episodes a few days early and our gratitude for allowing us to keep making this podcast, which we love to do. See you next time in Sad Francisco.